How FAA enforcement against airmen actually works. Hello, this is Forrest Owens. I'm an aviation lawyer, a private pilot, and an FAA licensed airframe and power plant mechanic. Let's begin with the first and most important point about FAA enforcement against airmen. Not every FAA problem begins as punishment, but every serious FAA case begins with proof. The governing framework starts with 14 C.F.R. Part 13, FAA Order 2150.3c, and the FAA's Compliance Program. That structure matters because the FAA does not just have one enforcement tool, it actually has several. In practical terms, the agency works in three gears. The first gear is compliance action. The second is administrative action, such as a warning notice or a letter of correction. The third is legal enforcement, which can mean certificate suspension, revocation, or in some situations, a civil penalty. This is one of the biggest misunderstandings in this area. Pilots often think the FAA either does nothing or takes your certificates. The real system is more graduated than that, but it is also less forgiving than many airmen assume. The FAA's own compliance program explains that the agency prefers rapid compliance and corrective action when the event reflects a mistake that can be fixed through cooperation, root cause analysis, and a durable correction. That is the modern compliance model. But the same FAA order also says that there are categories that generally require referral for legal enforcement action. Those categories include intentional conduct, reckless conduct, matters involving qualification or competency, and conduct where legal enforcement is required by law. That distinction is critical. If the FAA sees an honest, low-risk error and a cooperative airman, the matter may stay in the corrective lane. If the FAA sees dishonesty, recklessness, substance issues, repeated noncompliance, or true qualification problems, it can move quickly into the punitive lane. So remember this. The FAA is often willing to forgive a mistake, but is rarely willing to forgive a cover-up. There's another confusion point here. Airmen often use the phrase enforcement action to describe every unpleasant interaction with the FAA. Legally, that's not accurate. A reexamination under 49 U.S.C. Section 44709, often called a 709 ride, it's not the same thing as a punitive punishment or a suspension. It's remedial, and it's aimed at competency. But from the airman's perspective, it can feel just as consequential because it directly puts qualifications at issue. That is why qualification issues deserve special attention. Under Order 21503C, if the event suggests the airman may not have the knowledge, skill, judgment, or responsibility required to hold a certificate, the case can move out of the ordinary compliance track and into reexamination or certificate action. Once the FAA chooses legal enforcement, procedures become everything. Under the Pilot's Bill of Rights, the airman is entitled to written notice of investigation to cover certificate matters. Under the NTSB rules, appeals from the FAA suspension or revocation order generally must be filed within 20 days, and emergency appeals move even faster. That deadline is not a technical footnote, it is often outcome determinative. The NTSB explains that a late appeal can be dismissed, and a late answer can lead to facts being deemed admitted. In other words, some airmen lose procedurally before they even lose on the merits. Another practical reality is that evidence in these cases is often ordinary and unglamorous. FAA investigations are built from air traffic control audio, NTSB data, radar tracks, maintenance records, training records, medical applications, text messages, and statements made by the airman. The case is frequently won or lost on small documents created before anyone thought there would be legal enforcement. That is why the first response to the FAA inquiry matters so much. There's the impulse to explain everything immediately, and that can be dangerous. You do not need to help an FAA investigation by guessing, speculating, or trying to be overly reassuring. Precision is much more important than speed. In short, FAA enforcement exists against airmen, and it's best understood as a decision tree. The FAA asks whether the event reflects a fixable mistake, a pattern, a qualification problem, or a character problem. And once the agency decides which one it believes it has, the rest of the case usually follows. Would like you to take this away, and I hope this sticks. The most important moment in an airman enforcement case is often the moment before the airman realizes the case has started. Thank you for your interest in this topic. This information has been provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. Please direct, or if you have any questions, which are welcome, please send them to admin@aviationlegalcounsel.com. We look forward to helping you navigate these issues with precision.